Bluebell Hill rises over the North Downs on the A229 between Maidstone and the Medway towns. Daylight makes it ordinary, but night turns the climb into a corridor of headlights and breath held tight. Drivers have swapped the same warning for decades. Slow down by the bend near the Lower Bell area. Keep your eyes forward and do not trust what steps out of the verge at the last second. This episode followed the 1965 tragedy that seeded the legend and the reports that followed. Ghost, urban myth or shared memory, the road has a reputation that refuses to die. Kent has long carried stories in its chalk and woodland. Bluebell Hill sits among prehistoric earthworks and old trackways, so it's a place where people already expect the past to press close. The road itself funnels traffic through steep gradients and sudden curves. In wet weather or fog, visibility drops fast, tyres hiss on slick tarmac, and a single shadow can look like a person. That setting matters because hauntings often attach to geography as much as grief. When a story starts in a dangerous place, every near miss becomes fuel for what people swear they saw. On Friday the 19th of November 1965, 4 young women travelled along Bluebell Hill in a Ford Cortina. A collision with a Jaguar left 3 of them fatally injured and 1 survivor in shock. Contemporary reporting and later retelling identified the bride-to-be as Susan or Susanna Brown, aged 22. She was due to marry the very next day, a detail that sharpened the public's sorrow. 2 friends, Judith Lingham and Patricia Ferguson, also died, and Gillian Burchett survived. The facts are tragic enough without ghosts, but tragedy is often where the stories begin. Accounts place the crash near the junction by Old Chatham Road, close to where the hill starts to fall away. Brake lights, twisted metal, and the sudden stillness after impact lingered in memory. Within days, the narrative gained a cruel symmetry. A hen night, a wedding dress waiting at home, and a future cut short on a road that thousands used without thinking twice. Local communities remember tragedies through landmarks. When you can point to the bend and say there, grief becomes map pinned, and the map itself starts to feel haunted. Not long after the crash, drivers began reporting a woman in white near the roadside. Sometimes she stood by the verge, sometimes she ran into the carriageway as if searching for help. The detail that repeats is the shock of immediacy. 1 second there is an open road, the next a pale figure forces a swerve, a slam of the brakes, and a heartbeat that will not settle. Whether these early reports were coincidence or contagion of gossip, they set the pattern. Bluebell Hill was no longer just dangerous. It was watchful and strangely personal. One popular version turns the apparition into a phantom hitchhiker. A lone woman appears near the Lower Bell pub area, asks for a lift, and gives an address with quiet certainty. The driver glances into the rearview mirror minutes later and finds the back seat empty. No door opened, no footstep, just absence, as if the passenger was never there at all. Sometimes a handbag is said to remain on the seat. Sometimes nothing is left behind. Either way, the tale lands the same. A living person cannot explain what just happened. Another variant is harsher and more physical. Motorists claim they hit the woman, feel the thud of impact and stop in panic expecting blood, glass and an ambulance call. They search the roadside with torches and find no body and no injured stranger. The only thing real is the dent in their nerve, the shameful relief and the fear of what they struck. Stories like this sit on the edge between supernatural and psychology. Shock can write a memory in seconds, then reread it for years as proof that the road is cursed. Bluebell Hill is often described as Britain's most famous vanishing hitchhiker legend. Folklorists note similar tales across the world, but this one clings to a named tragedy. That anchor makes it feel verifiable. Witnesses can cite the date, the young ages, and the wedding that never happened. So the ghost seems less like fiction and more like aftermath. Skeptical researchers also point out the friend of a friend pattern. The core story spreads without primary evidence, yet it survives because it fits what people want to believe. In July 1974, a separate report added another thread. Bricklayer Maurice Goodenough told police he had struck a child on Bluebell Hill and left her wrapped in a blanket by the road. When officers returned, the child was gone and no missing girl was identified. The detail of the blanket reads like a prop from a nightmare, a soft thing left where no child should be. Whether misunderstood accident, panic, or legend growing legs, the 1974 tale widened the haunting. It was no longer one woman, but a place that produces impossible pedestrians. Through the 1980s and the 1990s, new sightings were logged in newspapers and local talk. Some spoke of a woman in white and others of a figure stepping into headlights then dissolving. A recurring element is the mirror. Drivers check behind them and see nothing, then feel watched anyway, as if the absence itself is proof that something shared the car for a moment. By this stage, the haunting had a life independent of 1965. Even people who never knew the original names still knew the warning. Bluebell Hill, slow down, keep your distance. Some storytellers add a red scarf woman and an older crone-like figure from the woods. These variations may reflect multiple rumours or different near misses retold with new costumes. Folklore works like that. A road becomes a stage and the cast expands until every strange moment can be filled under the same title, even when the details contradict each other. The point is not to force one fixed canon. It is to observe how a single fatal event can seed an entire ecology of hauntings, each variation feeding the next and reshaping the story over time. To understand why this legend grips so hard, it helps to think about driving itself. You are alone in a moving box, making constant decisions with incomplete information and limited time. At night, the brain fills gaps aggressively. Glare blooms, rain smears light, and a reflective road sign can briefly read as a shoulder, a face, or a dress caught in the wind. Yet the emotional truth remains. If you believe you nearly killed someone, even for a second, the feeling becomes a private haunting you carry home, and you tell it to someone. Bluebell Hill is also close to places with deep time. The North Downs hold ancient tracks and old barrows, while nearby villages carry their own tales of monks, pilgrims, and lost travellers. When people already think a landscape is layered, a modern tragedy can feel like the newest layer rather than a separate event. The road becomes a seam between eras, not just a route. That is why witnesses often describe the air changing, colder, heavier, or too quiet. Whether meteorology or mood, the language suggests a thread rather than a straight line. The bride-to-be detail shapes the ghost's costume. White dress, bare arms, and a sense of urgency, as if she is still trying to reach a ceremony that time had cancelled. In some retellings, she asks to be taken to her home address, then vanishes before arrival. In others, she simply appears in the headlights as if thrown forward by unseen hands. Notice what is missing from the stories. There is rarely aggression, only confusion and longing. This is grief haunting, not a monster, and that makes it harder to dismiss. Local pubs and laybys become narrative markers. The Lower Bell is repeatedly named as the spot where the hitchhiker is seen, anchoring the supernatural to a recognisable human place. That anchoring matters because it invites replication. Late night drivers know where to look, so they look harder, and expectation is a powerful lens that can sharpen ordinary shadows. Even skeptics concede one thing. The legend changes behaviour. People slow down. watch The Verge, and talk about the dead with a respect they might otherwise forget to offer. There is also a harsher interpretation. The haunting is a cultural way of processing road death in an era when car ownership surged and safety culture lagged behind speed and convenience. A fatal crash becomes a warning story. The ghost is the consequence made visible, a reminder that a moment's inattention can end 3 lives and alter a 4th forever. In that reading, Bluebell Hill is haunted by statistics and conscience. The phantom appears because people need a face for risk and a narrative for why they should care. Still, some reports resist tidy explanations. Drivers describe the figure as sharply detailed, close enough to see hair, fabric and expression, not a blur at the edge of sight. They speak of time slowing, the moment stretching as the car skids and the world narrows to a single choice: hit her or swerve and risk the embankment. Those accounts sound like trauma narratives, yet they also sound like encounter reports. The overlap is where the legend thrives, because neither side can fully claim the experience. Researchers who catalogue anomalous claims often note how the vanishing hitchhiker travels through communities. It is memorable, brief and easy to retell without needing proof. Bluebell Hill adds local names, a date and a vivid hook, so the story sticks. When television and newspapers mention it, the tale gains fresh credibility and fresh listeners. That media feedback loop can create waves of sightings. Each retelling primes new witnesses, and every new witness becomes another retelling, even if the original perception was mundane. Let's return to the known victims, because the human story can get lost beneath the ghost. 3 young women died and a 4th survived, carrying the burden of being the one who lived. Survival after such a crash is not a clean victory. It can mean years of recovery, nightmares and sudden guilt, even when the survivor did nothing wrong. If the road feels haunted, it may be because the living were haunted first. Sometimes the strangest apparitions are the ones memory projects onto a place it cannot forgive. In Kent, roadside shrines and anniversary conversations keep tragedy present. People mention the date, the bend, and the wedding that never happened, as if it occurred last year. Over time, the story becomes local heritage. Visitors ask about the ghost. Locals roll their eyes and lower their voice, and the hills gain an identity beyond traffic and geography. That identity is powerful. Once a place is labelled haunted, every unusual sound, every fog bank, and every sudden animal crossing becomes part of the same file in the mind. For our episode's evidence section, we hold 2 truths at once. The 1965 crash is documented history, and the later sightings are a mixture of personal testimony and folklore. Testimony is not useless, but it is slippery. Memory reshapes, fear edits, and retelling polishes, so a sincere witness can still be wrong about what they saw. Yet folklore is also data. It shows what a community fears, mourns and repeats. Bluebell Hill's Ghosts is a mirror of 1960s loss, reflected through decades of night driving. Imagine the hill on a winter evening, mist pooling in the dips, sodium lamps smearing gold across wet asphalt, and the radio fading between stations as the car climbs into quiet. You are tired, you know the story, and you tell yourself you do not believe it. Then a shape stands where there should be nothing, and your foot moves before thought catches up. Whether ghost or optical trick, the sensation is real. The body reacts, the heart races, and the road becomes charged. Later you will replay it, and wonder who was watching whom. Bluebell Hill's legend persists because it avoids closure. No single photograph ends the debate. No confession explains every report, and no memorial closes the door on the feeling. Some mysteries fade when solved, and others fade when forgotten. This one does neither, because the road remains busy, and the story remains simple enough to travel mouth to mouth. Each generation inherits it like a cautionary heirloom. You learn it from family, mates, or local papers, and one night, when fog rolls in, you find yourself believing despite yourself. If you visit the area in daylight, it can feel almost unfair. Green slopes, chalk cuts and open sky, nothing that looks like horror, only a fast road through pretty countryside. That contrast is part of the haunting. The ordinary face of a place makes the night stories feel more invasive, as if the uncanny has chosen to live inside the everyday. For the living, the safest approach is practical. Respect the dead by driving carefully. Treat stories as stories, and remember that real loss is the truest ghost on the road. Bluebell Hill ghosts sit at a crossroad of history, a modern tragedy on a rural English climb, and a public hungry for meaning in sudden death and unexplained near misses. Some legends persist because they are true, and others persist because they are useful. This one warns, memorializes, and gives shape to fear, even when details change between tellings. In the end, what matters is not certainty, but memory. Something happened here, and the road has carried it forward, night after night, long after the people involved were gone.